Hey, broadcast. All right, we are live. We can get this show on the road whenever you're ready.
Always ready, Joe Sergeant.
Good. Let me just get the chat window open over here so I can see all you lovely people chatting at us that aren't
Hey,
there yet.
it's live.
I told you it was live.
It's a good thing I put my pants back on.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely good. Nobody needs to see that. At least nobody on the internet.
I thought that's where that was supposed to be put.
On the internet, no one knows you're a dog. Did you get your beer yet?
Beer.
Yay. What you drinking?
This would be a delirium. Because delirium is wonderful.
I picked up a 6-pack of this Yards Love Stout. I figured with my love of stouts, it was perfect. It's even got the heart tattoo, that the stereotypical love mom tattoo on the front. Okay. We ready to go? I think we're ready to go. I'm going to play the intro, huh?
Intro.
Yay. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin podcast, your source for IT news, commentary, and a healthy dose of paranoia. That sounded much better than last week. Last week things were just so quiet. This whole podcast thing is definitely a learning curve.
Podcasting is hard, like computers.
Podcasting is hard. All right. Welcome to episode number 21. You might notice we're recording 2 weeks in a row. That's because we missed 2 weeks ago. We should have recorded, but there's stuff falling over.
So it begins.
That was my backpack. Just fell right on over. There are spirits in my office tonight, I suppose.
Yeah, you should be drinking them.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some in this pewter mug. I still haven't got an engraved mug for the podcast. I've really got to do that. Maybe we should each get engraved mugs for the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
What do we get engraved on them?
I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. Maybe people can submit. We'll have a voting contest.
Can I get Cthulhu on mine? It might be more visible than what it is on my glass.
You can barely see Cthulhu on your.
It's etched into the glass. It's pretty awesome.
What do they call that? There's a word for that. When the head of the beer is smeared on the side of the glass, there was a name for that. John told me what it was. Our resident beer snob.
I have
called it like lattice or something. I don't remember.
Idea.
I don't remember. There's a name for that. John, if he's listening, is probably screaming at his headphones right now.
John is always screaming at his headphones.
Yeah, probably. All right, so I guess we may as well just go ahead and get started with the news, right?
We could do that.
We could do that. We have news. We have news. So first off, from Tech Target, which is a news source I've never heard of before. I found it in one of my feeds, and it sounded very relevant to our podcast. Kubernetes on AWS users cheer as AWS joins the CNCF. If you don't know what the CNCF is, I looked that up. It's called the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which apparently is somehow related to a number of cloud-based projects, Kubernetes being one of them.
Right.
So the article is about, I guess, I don't know, AWS can't really join a CNCF. Amazon must have. Yes. Yeah, it says Amazon Web Services joined. I guess I didn't know a service could join a foundation.
I think AWS is the company, the operating company is actually called
Are
Amazon
they
Web Services.
really? Okay. I just thought it was, I guess Amazon is just a parent company then?
I could just be making that up too.
Maybe you're making that up. Maybe this
That's
is a
possible.
horribly written article and no one should listen to it, or maybe they're right and we have no idea what we're talking about. I'm going to go with the latter. Anyway, the article doesn't really say that Amazon or AWS has committed to running Kubernetes on AWS. It's really a whole lot of speculation that because they've joined the CNCF, that this could be their plan. So it goes into a lot of detail as to, what it could mean. However, given we haven't covered this yet, but both Jason and I have poked around at Amazon's Elastic Container Service and came up a bit wanting. So this could be good news, which is why I've included it in our show notes or our show tonight.
A bit wanting, as in yuck.
Yeah. I mean, we can cover this. I was hoping we'd cover it in its own show just to really cover it well. But yeah, ECS seems like it has a little bit of growing to do before it's a really decent container service. Now, I've heard otherwise from other places, other places that are using it. So I don't know. Maybe we were using it wrong. Maybe we're expecting too much of it. I don't know.
I kind of wanted it to work. I mean,
yeah. Well, so I don't know. I was expecting something like Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't Kubernetes, I was expecting something like Kubernetes out of ECS, and that's not quite what it seemed like.
Right. So, I mean, I've looked briefly at blocks, and I don't think it's actually available yet, unless I'm missing something. Because what's there, what Amazon currently has is basically a nice little web page in front of you spinning up. Like it's an automatic spin up of a bunch of servers that run Docker Swarm is what it looks like. But you can't access any of the lower level stuff. So regardless of what it's using, it basically runs the containers, but you still get charged for the entire server being running or for the entire server running.
Yeah. So I mean,
whether there's containers on it or not.
What this article is saying really echoes sort of what I had pictured out of the Elastic Container Service, which was you could just submit containers and they would run on AWS. Not that you had to run a bunch of servers that ran whatever underneath that you didn't really have direct control over and you could submit containers to, but that they just had an infrastructure already running where you'd submit containers. Sort of like the article compares it to Azure's container service, which I didn't know was a thing. I guess I haven't looked closely enough at Microsoft's offerings, but I was thinking more like, what is that? Google Compute Agent
Google Compute,
yeah.
GCP,
which is really just what we've described. Here's your container, run it, and it runs.
Right.
So
yeah, and I haven't dug into Google real deep, but that's my understanding is it's just you want to run a container, you run a container. Now,
yeah,
I get that there's more to it than that. I mean, you come down to the networking and being able to isolate things, but there's got to be a better way to do it than what ECS is doing.
Right. So I mean, if they could integrate a container service with the existing network and identity infrastructure that you can already define on AWS, then that would be a pretty cool service. And that's what I was picturing. What I ended up with was, there's some integration, but it's really the only level of integration that you get on EC2, because that's where you're basically running your own container platform on EC2, but they're removing some of the ability to manage the thing. So it felt broken to me.
Yeah, it felt broken and it felt rushed. It was
So
Amazon got caught with their pants down and
yeah,
needed to throw
we
something
need
together
containers.
really
Hurry up!
quick.
How can we do it? Well, we've
Yep.
already got this compute platform.
Right, right. Docker's free, and we can automate it.
Yeah. So, I
Congrats.
mean, I don't want to get too technical in the news section here. Like I said, I'd like to cover ECS and other suites like that in another episode. So,
Right.
yeah,
Now,
I think
that said, them joining the CNCF is great.
yeah,
It's a positive move. It puts money out there for Kubernetes and some of these other projects. However, don't get your hopes up that Amazon is going to deploy Kubernetes on AWS. Somebody I know who happens to know the lead developer or the lead engineer or whatever his title is over at AWS, the answer that he got was basically, yeah, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We think we can make something better than Kubernetes.
and I mean maybe
So
they can.
maybe they can.
It
Maybe
doesn't
blocks
help
will be
me
better than
though because
Kubernetes.
I have a need now, maybe not immediately, but soon to try to run containers somewhere.
Right.
And I'd like to do it on AWS, but I don't want to do it on ECS because I don't like the way it works. So if I deploy them elsewhere, I'm probably not going to move them to Amazon later.
Maybe. I
So
mean, the nice part about containers
it
is you
depends
can
on
move them pretty good.
pricing
So,
and whatever. But
yep.
all right. So TechCrunch.
Moving right along. Hey, did you hear about that guy who got arrested after DEF CON?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we talked about it last week.
Yeah. He pled not guilty officially now, apparently.
I mean, I'm surprised.
And now he's back on Twitter.
Yeah. So from what I read, I forget if it was in this article. It might have been in this article. I think I skimmed this article, but I read another article that was about him pleading not guilty. Apparently, the judge has granted him the ability to work again, but he can't have access to what was it? The server in which he stopped. WannaCry from.
Oh,
Like, I don't know exactly how that's related to this Kronos malware that he supposedly wrote and distributed.
who knows? According to this article, the government acknowledged that the case against him was historical in nature, um, which would suggest that he's no longer a threat. Um, so, that's interesting. And then I guess that somehow makes it better for his case. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
So he's allowed to move around the U.S. freely and relocate to Los Angeles while he awaits his trial.
yeah,
Guess is that whoever he works for is possibly located in Los Angeles.
yeah. So I'm hoping that. I mean, like I said last time we recorded, I really hope this guy's innocent. I've heard lots of commentary on both sides, including from some respectable and prominent podcasters, suggesting that he may actually be guilty. But again, it's all speculation, and they fully admitted that the same way we did last week. So no one knows right now.
Yep. So we'll update as we hear things. So
Yeah. So basically, the point is, as expected, he's pled not guilty, and I don't know, the fact that they've given him some of his rights back make me feel like he's not in as hot water as everyone seemed to allude to. Like, if they really thought he was a threat, I would think that they wouldn't, he'd be locked up. He wouldn't be
yeah.
back online.
Yep.
So, kind of bodes well for him, I think. But anyway. All right. On to what could be a touchy news article from DreamHost. You wanna start this one? It's your article.
Interestingly, I'm seeing. How did I come across this? I saw this. I think I saw this on Hacker News, and it's. I mean, looking at my Twitter feed, it's actually starting to blow up pretty good. So basically, DreamHost posted a blog article today outlining that there's a website called disruptj20.org, which is some sort of a anti um, Trump site.
Yeah.
Basically, they're talking about um, disrupting gatherings and whatnot. I guess the protesting the inauguration, etc. Um, turns out the government didn't like this, I guess, and they've basically come to DreamHost and said, yeah, we want all the information you have on all the visitor IP addresses. So every bit of information, including contact info, email content, photos, um, everything that you can off of those IPs. Because they're going to try to figure out who visited the website. Which seems a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Now the piece we don't know, and we may never know, is why. Why are they asking for that information?
Right.
We can speculate all day long. We can say, "Oh, Big Brother is trying to, take out those who oppose the government," or
we don't have to speculate though. The internet's doing it for us.
Yeah, right. Or it could be that these people have actually done something wrong, and DreamHost is obstructing justice. Right. So all we have is DreamHost side right now.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about, so it's the visitors of the site that they're after.
Yeah, and that is kind of odd.
That's I don't know, not cool.
It looks like they've got the EFF on their side.
Yeah,
which I got to imagine that the EFF doesn't generally fight for lost causes.
Well, that depends on the ask, but
well, no, okay. So what I mean is they don't fight for things they don't believe in. At least I hope.
No, I know. I'm kidding.
So if DreamHost came to them and said this is the story, and the EFF thought it was sketchy, I got to imagine the EFF isn't going to represent them.
Right. So I mean, this goes back to right. This goes back to years ago when I was working for an ISP that I partially owned. One of the things we looked at was, what do you do with logs? How long do you keep them? How long are you required to keep them? And unless the laws have changed recently, unless you're in a special sector like finance or banking or something,
right, where this sort of stuff is regulated for you,
right, there are no log retention laws. So
yeah, we've had this discussion in the past, not necessarily on the show, but it's more or less you write your own policy.
Yep.
And stick to it.
Yep.
And as long as you stick to your own policy, you're within the law.
Right.
If your policy is I don't keep any logs and you don't have any logs, then you're not in any trouble.
Right. Just be careful though, because if they find logs, you violated your own policy and now you're in trouble.
And now your policy is void.
Right. So, this is where automation comes in. Make sure your logs are all consistently rotated, keep the ones that you need, ditch the ones that you don't. But yeah, short log retentions, like if you don't need the logs, get rid of them. I mean, you're going to save disk space anyway, but if you don't need the logs, ditch them. Ditch them. So,
sorry for any quacking noises here. It's already time for the second beer.
It's opening beer. That's an okay thing.
Beer opening time.
So yeah, get rid of those logs. And like Nate said, I don't know that we'll ever understand exactly what they're after here. It feels like a really big overreach to me. But I can't believe that DreamHost would just outright not give logs over that they have because they don't believe in that. I'm sure they're being advised by the lawyers to not do that because it's overreach.
There are certainly hosts that I think would do that. Just out of spite.
Sure.
Sure,
but DreamHost is a big enough company that
sure. Yeah, I think DreamHost
I don't think
DreamHost is big enough that they're not going to stretch their neck out for the average user for something that they don't believe in.
Right.
Now, the fact that it's an anti-Trump site, there's politics there, obviously, I mean, like they directly are political. The site is anyway. and the request does seem odd. But yeah, we don't know what's going on behind the curtain, as it were.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, I do like the idea that they're trying to protect their user. I just hope that they're not doing it out of spite.
Right.
Right. So anyway, I think we've avoided explosion there. Let's move on to some happier news.
Yeah. Okay. Again, that depends on who you are.
This news. I mean, when I read over this article, I mean, you heard me. I chuckled. I outright laughed at this one.
Yep. All right. So let's
So
start this off.
From Boing Boing.
Yep. Airbnb recommends or uses, I think it's just recommends or prefers a lock called the Lock State Remote Lock 6i. It's some sort of a smart lock. Runs about almost $500 a pop, and it has cool features like over-the-air updates.
Yeah, so I can understand why this is. I mean, I haven't looked into the product, but I can understand why this would be useful on something like an Airbnb. It's basically a smart lock.
Right.
From what I can tell, it's a smart lock which you can interact with maybe via an app or maybe over the internet for that matter.
Yeah, I'm looking. It's a Wi-Fi lock. Oh, it's one of those keypad locks you put on your doors. I got it.
Good.
And it's got a little camera in it so you can see who's there.
So
Isn't that neat?
It receives OTA updates, which I mean, good for you, Lockstate. Okay? Like the fact that you're updating your IoT device, like good on you, right? I hope it doesn't have a default password. However, apparently lots of users, I don't know how many, does it say in the article? I didn't see that.
At least 500 locks.
At least 500 locks. Okay. Received a letter that goes something like, Dear Lockstate customer, we notified you earlier today of a potential issue with your LS6i lock. We're sorry to inform you about some unfortunate news. Your lock is among a small subset of locks that had a fatal error, rendering it inoperable. Think about this. Your lock that locks the building in which you're renting out via Airbnb, which may or may not be a property that you frequently visit, is now inoperable after an OTA update.
And just to be clear, it failed locked. So those locks are now unlockable.
In order to fix your lock, there are two options. Option one, the back portion of the lock will need to be returned to lock state so that the software on the lock can be updated. Total time to fix and return 5 to 7 days. Lockstate can ship a replacement interior lock to you or for you to replace. You can send the faulty lock back. Total lead time 14 to 18 days. We're sorry, you're locked out of your building for up to almost 3 weeks.
Right. Now they do have keys. They do have keys. So you're not completely locked out.
Not completely locked out. That's good.
And to be honest, I'd go with option 2 myself because then you get a brand new lock. Whereas with option 1, they're going to fix the software and send you back the same lock.
Right.
Just my personal recommendation.
Yeah, I mean,
also the article might want to choose a different lock.
The article doesn't really say how it got bricked.
It was an over-the-air update. Is so
right,
you can speculate from there. So,
like, was it because there's something faulty in your lock, or was it because there's just some sort of a not often hit edge case in their software update that caused your lock to get bricked?
I'm wondering since they're saying, it's only certain locks. And I wonder if maybe there was a manufacturing run at some point that used a different component. I mean, we've seen
That's
this
what I'm thinking about. So this is an embedded device, right? So this means that from day one, it was designed and coded by Lockstate. It was built by Lockstate. They put the software on it. The only thing I would imagine that the user gets to change is some preferences, like what the keypad is and what the Wi-Fi password is and all those things, right? So the fact that it failed an update makes me think that there's something faulty with the devices that failed the update, or something different about them. Maybe not faulty, but if they're going to take the back of your lock and reprogram it and send it back to you, it makes me think this could be an issue again in the future.
Right.
For the 500
So,
or so locks out of however many lock state locks exist in this world.
right. So if you kick through to the article that's linked from Boing Boing, there's a little bit more information, and maybe an avenue that I didn't realize. These are used for Airbnbs.
Yeah.
So if you're an Airbnb customer and you're affected by this, you may have gone out for dinner and can't get back into the Airbnb.
Oh, crap.
Yeah.
I'm locked out of a building
Yep.
that isn't mine. I don't have the key.
Right.
That's awesome.
And so some of these people that I know that have Airbnbs don't live anywhere near them.
Yeah,
So getting
right.
a
So
key
good
there
luck.
yeah.
Just break the window.
According to this other article, Lockstate said they've already fixed 60% of the locks.
So the other 40% hopefully weren't occupied at the time of the brick.
Sorry. According to a tweet that Lockstate sent out, 60% are back online. So, yeah, oops. These things happen. I mean, you can
Yeah.
argue that Lockstate was, obviously they're at fault, but you can argue that they didn't test enough. I mean, it's hard to say without knowing how many locks there actually are out there.
Yeah.
So how many succeeded versus failing?
How many
I mean,
how many locks are there? How many different models are there? Was this
right.
this model of lock or this production run of the lock had an issue that we weren't aware of? Yeah, I can understand it. I mean, software updates are always a scary thing. And when you're dealing with something that lets you in and out of a building, I'd imagine it's... But it also means you should be QA testing the hell out of it, right?
I would hope so.
Yeah, so it's... I don't know. The whole thing is odd. The best I could put it. It's odd.
Yeah, it happens. So, I mean, you just need a more fail-safe way to push updates like that.
Yeah, right.
Which in a lot of cases is potentially extra hardware, extra cost, etc. So, sometimes you make shortcuts.
Yeah. So, I mean, it may make me sound curmudgeon-y, but it always makes me feel like devices like this need to be as simple as possible.
Right.
As simple as possible to be effective. Right? That's right. I was going to include this as a news article. I forgot all about it. Did you see the article about that smart gun?
Oh, yeah. The one that they defeated with a magnet?
Yeah. Well, a magnet or a bunch of radio gear.
Yeah.
So they basically defeated it in the way you'd expect it to be defeated, which is they reproduced the signal of the smart watch that it paired to, and then in the other way was just with a magnet. Well,
yeah. So the magnet just is a replay attack. That's all.
Can you really call that a replay attack?
It's the same. It's the same attack used on I think it was electronic safes, where you can use a magnet to basically replay the state of the system, and it just causes the locks to pop open on
the magnet's
safes.
not replaying anything. The magnet is moving the pin which keeps the gun from firing. You can call it a replay attack if you want, but that's a real fancy way of saying I've used a magnet to move a piece of metal.
This is what I read. I can't, I'm not sure if that's the right. Maybe it was the signals that was the replay attack. That would make more sense, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay. So if it's moving the pin, then that's the same as the safes then. So yeah. So I know I'm right about the magnet and the safes, damn it.
Here's the Wired article. I'm going to add it to the show notes because we're talking about it, but
right.
I don't know.
I'm curious.
I really wanted to add this in and talk about it and I don't know.
You're just gonna get the Second Amendment people jumping up and down.
We sort of missed it last week because that was when I really read about it. But so I'm gonna.
We can talk about it. So
You should
going
you
back to
should find it.
the
You should find it in the notes now if you wanted to read
okay,
it.
going back to the locks. I'm curious what Deviant would have to say. So one of the people that we know, one of our acquaintances, is
Yep.
Deviant Olem.
Yep.
He's a lock guy. He's basically a lock picker. Knows all about this sort of stuff.
Mhm.
And looking at the lock, it's the keypad is convenient. There's probably some sort of a bypass just because it's an electronic lock. I'm wondering how strong the actual key is. Is this like generic, locks that everybody has on their house strong, or is this something stronger?
The article you linked. There it is. Yeah, you can't really see the lock because they're covering it with their hand.
Yeah,
I was curious if you could see the thing, but
no,
I mean, I'd
Lock
imagine
State,
for a $500 lock, they're not going to skimp out on the key lock.
you'd be surprised.
Yeah, maybe. I would hope that it's at least equivalent to a standard home lock.
I hope not. Not for $500. Standard home lock is just a quick set. My kids can pick those.
A quick set, maybe. I'm not sure if I would call quick set a standard home lock anymore. There are better locks from, I think.
Oh, they're absolutely better locks.
Was it Brinks, I think? Might be Brinks. I recently bought a new exterior lock for my house, and I forget what brand it is. Maybe I shouldn't tell you on the podcast anyway, because somebody will figure out how to defeat it and come break into my house. But anyway, it was supposedly bump key resistant and pick resistant. I mean, obviously, anyone's going to tell you that. I don't own a bump key to test it, but I am really curious.
Resistant and pick resistant. That just means it has security pins in it. That's all.
Yeah.
And is
that easy to defeat as well?
Pick it. I'm not very good at it, but yes.
I do not expect that any lock created by man that is still physically actuated is unpickable. I don't believe it. It's the question of how difficult it is to pick.
Deviant has one lock that he chooses to use on his valuables that he says thus far has proven to be virtually unpickable. That's not to say that nobody has done it, but like the number of people that can pick it is incredibly small.
Yeah.
And I can't. It's some weird foreign lock. And I don't remember what it was called. If I can find it.
So to give you guys some interesting backstory about Deviant while Jason is trying to look up this lock, he once broke into a bank by blowing, what was it, whiskey or vodka yes. or something through the crevice in the door and getting the sensor on the inside to unlock the door.
Yep.
It's on video.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It had a really weird name. I can't remember the name of the lock. I'll have to find out. If I can find out, I will update everybody.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
They're not cheap. They're not cheap locks, but they're pretty cool.
Yeah, so should we move on to the smart gun?
Sure.
So the smart gun, I'm trying to see if I could find the manufacturer of the thing. I would have been better prepared if I'd remembered to put it in the show notes.
Armatics. German manufacturer Armatics.
Right. All right. So the concept behind this thing is that if it is not within range of a watch, a certain watch that is paired to the gun, apparently the gun has electronics in it which pairs, I assume, over Bluetooth. Oh, neat. The watch even has a little emblem of a handgun on it when it's paired to the gun. That's nice. Anyway, if you look at the picture in the article I put in the show notes, you can see a picture of the watch. The watch looks like your standard watch, and I assume it's Bluetooth or wireless or something that, pairs to the gun. The idea is that you cannot fire the gun. That is, the action is blocked when it's not within range of this smartwatch, or I don't know if you call it a smartwatch, a watch that pairs to the gun. And this guy, I'm trying to find his name here.
Plor? Yeah, it's a pseudonym.
That's his handle, I assume.
Yep.
He said about trying to basically hack the gun so that you could fire without the watch. First he used some electronics, which weren't terribly expensive, but it did appear that it took him a bit of work to figure this out, right? Because he had to figure out what frequency the thing was on, then he had to reproduce the frequency. But in the end of the day, once he figured all that out, it was relatively easy to reproduce. And he was able to either amplify the signal from the watch so that it would open, or I think he could even generate the signal.
Well, he was also able to block the signal.
He was able to block the signal as well. So I mean, let's talk a little bit about why you would bother. Like, why would you want a smart gun like this? Why would you want a gun that only fires when this watch is in range? Now, I was thinking about this a little bit when I was thinking about talking about it on the podcast, and I figured you break down the reasons for owning a firearm into 3 legal categories: military service, police service, and civilian service. Not service, but civilian ownership. Okay. A gun like this is probably designed for one thing only: self-defense, or I don't know what the proper word to use. It's meant to hurt other people, to either prevent them from hurting you or prevent them from hurting others.
Right.
Okay. So, you could imagine that in police service, it would be used to stop criminals. In civil service or civilian service, it would be used to stop home intruders or, whatever. The idea is that if you are disarmed and someone gets hold of your gun, they can't use it on you. If you drop your gun, or if your gun is laying around the house, which is irresponsible firearm ownership to begin with, a child could pick it up and hurt themselves or hurt someone else. So the idea is that unless whoever's holding the gun has the watch, they can't fire it. It's essentially useless. So even if it's loaded and the safety's off and whatever, it still can't be fired unless the watch is close by. So what he set out to test is whether that was true or not, right? So obviously extending the range would mean that you could steal this gun, or if you were determined enough, you could fire it without the watch being close, which is the way it was designed. Obviously, you could basically, if you could put your transmitter in range of the watch and your receiver near the gun, and they were within range of each other, you could still fire the gun, with the extended range. You could block the signal from the watch, I assume by jamming whatever frequency it talks on. So if you were a home intruder, or if you were a criminal and you knew that the police in your area used these particular guns, you could jam them so that the police were now disarmed, or the person whose home you were trying to invade was disarmed. I can't imagine that these things would ever be used in military service. I mean, you were in the military. I know it's a long time ago, but I just can't imagine that something this complicated would be put into battle.
Yes and no. Not something like this. Not complicated for this matter. So, I mean, they're testing other, quote, smart weapons, but the smart part of it is not to prevent somebody else from firing it. The smart part of it is like homing bullets.
The smart part of it is how to kill more efficiently.
Right.
Which makes sense for the military.
Well,
you may not like taking lives, but the bottom line is that's what the military is there for. An unfortunate fact of life. But anyway. So anyway, where was I going with all this? Personally, I feel sort of like locks, which is why talking about the lock reminded me about this thing. I feel like a firearm should be a simpler device. I mean, at its base, a firearm is a very simple mechanism. It's a spring, it's a firing pin, it's an explosion that's controlled, and it's a projectile. Right? That's relatively foolproof. And then what you have to do is surround that with safety and common sense, and I don't know. I don't want to go too far off the deep end, but you need to make sure that they don't fall in the hands of those who would harm others, which I know is a huge, difficult thing to solve. I think that making smart guns is simply taking a relatively simple machine that has a single purpose, which is to fire a projectile for whatever purpose you have for the projectile, and makes it a little too complicated. If you're firing a gun, it needs to work. If you're, how do I put this? If you have reason to fire a gun at another human being, it just needs to work because you're probably depending on it to save your life or save someone else's life. If you're going to wrap that in a bunch of technology that makes it safer in so many other situations, but in the end ends up causing you to not be able to defend your life, or for a police officer to be able to defend someone else's life, you've got a problem.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say a damn thing because I don't want emails.
Right. I mean, this does obviously you're going to have a lot of people who agree or disagree with the fact that we in here in America are allowed to own firearms. I know we have a couple of listeners who are from across the pond who may not even enter their mind that they would want to own a firearm. Here in America, we're allowed to. And if we're allowed to, we're going to, right?
Some of us. Yeah. I mean, I've got sticking directly to the story.
Right.
The idea behind what they're trying to do is I mean, I get it. You're trying to make a safe gun. You're trying to make a gun that even if it was taken away, somebody can't shoot you with it. Understood. I get it.
And that is admirable.
Right.
I'm not saying that these guys should stop doing what they're doing. I think that a well-designed firearm that can only be fired by the person intended to fire it is a great idea. Implementing that is a little tricky.
Implementing that is extremely tricky. I mean, in this case, you're still talking about a mechanical mechanism, all the way up, and simply having a small pin, well, bigger than the firing pin, but it's a relatively small pin, being the only thing that's keeping you from being able to fire the weapon. And the from what I'm seeing in the video and from what I understand, that pin is activated or deactivated by the electromagnet, which is turned on or off by the electronic mechanism in the gun that's activated when you pull the trigger that checks to see if the watch is close enough. Okay. So straight off the bat, like, there's so many different ways that can fail. You have a
absolutely
physical mechanism. It's all mechanical to fire that projectile. That's going to fail in this scenario. If you go down the path of like cars with their drive-by-wire or planes with their fly-by-wire, and the entire thing becomes where the trigger, you can pull the trigger all day long, and if the battery's dead, ain't nothing gonna happen. Or if if you get to that point and you're not counting on an actual mechanism to kick that pin off, to force the firing pin forward, to eject the cartridge, the whole 9 yards, then I think you may have a better mechanism that's, at that point, the only way to defeat that really is to take over the radio waves. But it's probably more expensive and it's may not be reliable, and insert a million reasons why here.
Yeah.
The idea is neat. I mean,
no, it is absolutely. And I mean, wasn't it, what was it? Total Recall that had firearms that were fingerprint activated?
No, you're
Fingerprint or
talking about Judge
DNA or
Dredd.
something?
Judge
Judge Dredd,
Dredd.
was it Judge Dredd?
Yep.
Yeah, where if you held, yeah, that's right, it was. If you had picked up the judge's gun and tried to use it, it would basically shock you or something. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that sort of thing is interesting. But and I mean, my phone's got a fingerprint reader right there. So can you build that into the grip of a handgun? Maybe.
Sure.
But again, this is electronic, which means it has a battery, which means that the battery could die. And if the battery dies, the gun is then useless. Like, that's a problem. I think it's a problem.
Yeah. If shooting that gun is your aim, then yes, that's a problem.
Well, I mean, that's the point, right? Like, all politics aside, if you own a gun, the reason you have it is to send a projectile at something, whether that's a target or an attacker or a criminal or whatever it is, right? The purpose of that thing is to be able to fire projectiles.
Right.
Right?
Agreed.
So adding complexity to that seems, unless you can make it foolproof, seems like a bad idea. I mean, as it is now,
Even the
firearms,
mechanism in guns isn't foolproof. So good luck with that.
no, you're right. You're right. And that's exactly where I was going with this. As it is now, the firearms that I own require maintenance in order to be reliable, in order to work properly, in order to not rust, because they're metal, right? They're made of metal. Adding to my, routine for, say, monthly firearm maintenance or whatever you want to call it, to check the batteries. I guess that could be done, right? But the bottom line is the day you need to pick that up in an emergency situation and use it, it just needs to work. I mean, I'd hate to see the folks who design these things get involved in some kind of a lawsuit because, someone picked this up to defend themselves and they couldn't.
I just want my computer to work all the time too. So,
Yeah. Right. Anyway, I guess we've beaten this one enough, and we've
tiptoe away
skirted a
from that
little
one
too closely into what could be a political nightmare. Yeah. Anyway, on to an article that I laughed out loud when I read. And this sounds so simple.
I'm not sure I know. I still haven't figured out why you're laughing at this.
So I'm flipping through. I have Flipboard on my phone, and I have a bunch of different categories set up, and I use that to seed the news articles that I throw into the podcast. I don't know how you do it, but that's how I do it. Right. So this is convenient, right? I wake up in the morning. I'm trying to wake up. I flip through Flipboard and see if there's anything interesting. Right. I'm going to bed at night, whatever. I flip through Flipboard. I try to find what's interesting. Well, just this afternoon, because we didn't have a lot of time between last episode and this one, I'm frantically looking for articles and I'm flipping through Flipboard. And I find this article in the Linux category of Flipboard that says how to shut down your Mac from the terminal. And I open it, I'm like, oh, well, there must be something different about how to shut down your Mac from the terminal than there is from every other Linux box I've ever dealt with. No, you use shutdown. Shutdown-H now. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, so spoiler alert, people. OS X is Unix.
When I read this, I'm like, who writes an article about this? Why is this a thing?
Before we get flooded with emails, Unix with a little u, not a Unix with a big U. Just, it's a variant.
It's BSD, isn't it?
BSD, right.
Darwin, was it still based on Darwin?
Right. Well, yeah, it's still Darwin is the OS X or the Apple version of BSD, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's still Unix-like or Starnix or whatever terminology you want to use. It's Unix at the core.
I had to include this in the podcast just because it lured me in to open it thinking I was going to learn something new. And instead it was just, oh, you use this handy command called shutdown. And they talk about it like this is new, like this is something that nobody would know.
Yeah, but think about your audience. So this is from OS
Mac
users or Mac users are I would argue maybe one step more advanced than a Windows user. At least they have a command line.
It starts the article with advanced Mac users may wish to shut down a computer from the command line.
Sure.
Advanced.
Sure. And you take a Windows user. How advanced do you think they have to be able to shut a computer down from the command line?
Guess what, guys? You can shut down your Windows box from a command line too. I think it's also the shutdown command, isn't it?
I don't know. It's been
shutdown
a really long time.
S, I think it is.
No, shutdown slash. It's shutdown slash something. They don't use dashes. They use.
Well, you
slashes.
can use dashes interchangeably with slashes on, I believe so, in Windows, unless you're using PowerShell, in which case I think it's all dashes because they tried to be as bash-like as possible.
Microsoft's articles says do shutdown /I so that it shows the dialog box.
That's not the point. If I'm at the command line, I just wanted to do what I've told it to do.
So /R restarts, /S shuts down.
Didn't I tell you? -S.
Yep. You can put comments in. You can do force. You can put timeout periods. It's the same damn thing.
Yeah, so guess what? You can shut down your Mac from the command line using the same thing you'd use to shut down your... In fact, you could probably type init 0 and it would shut down, which is my method of shutdown.
I don't know. Init command not found. Nope, can't use that.
Don't try it while you're recording.
It wasn't true. I wasn't giving... first of all, I don't run as root, so...
All of a sudden, Jason drops out of the podcast. He shut down his computer. That's like the old...
I've been computering for a while. I know what not to press.
That's like the old IRC troll, isn't it? Is it IRC? No, it was in the old BBS days.
Which one? No, it's on IRC too.
Back when I was using Major BBS, people would jump into teleconference, which was like their version of IRC before they had internet connectivity in their BBS. Anyway, X would exit just about anything, and people would just like jump into teleconference and go, "What's the Roman numeral for 10?" And then you'd see like 3 people drop out. Anyway.
Yeah, that reminds me of the IRC one where the masked passwords. When you type your password in, you see all stars. Oh, don't worry, just type your password in. We'll see all stars on our end.
If only things could be that sophisticated.
See,
that when
hang on.
You
I'll
were
type my
typing your
password. I'll type my password. You'll see. It'll show up as stars.
Star.
Yep, gotta love it.
All right, I think that does it for the news. So do we get any announcements tonight?
I don't know. I hereby announce that I'm out of beer.
Yeah, I already refilled mine once. You better go get another beer.
Mine's in the other room, so I got to go get one.
I can say the one announcement that I do have is that Danny failed miserably in bringing us our stickers at the LV Hackers meetup. So we still don't have new stickers. A Jedi Day was kind enough to print them. He gave them to Danny while he was at DEF CON, and they didn't end up coming to the meetup with Danny. So Danny is a failure. Danny, if you're listening, Danny's a failure.
Well, I mean, there's that now infamous picture of him getting help while drinking.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I also failed to bring. So I got these really cool coins.
Danny's a failure. Going in the show notes.
They look like that. If you can see that. It's a Threat Actors Guild coin.
Your feed from YouTube is a little pixelated.
Yeah,
it must be torrenting again.
So they're one of the security peeps that I know had them made, and I was going to bring them and hand them out. So I am also slightly failure, although nobody knew it was coming. So
yeah, last Wednesday we had the LV Hackers meetup. That was fun.
yes, and Bia gave her I went to DEF CON speech.
Then she painted
Told
my
us about-
fingernails.
And then she painted your fingernails, and she ended up painting my fingernails.
Yeah, I've cleaned mine off. My kids got a kick out of it when they saw it the next day, though.
My wife doesn't wear nail polish, so guess
Yeah?
what's not in the house?
You don't have any nail polish remover.
Yeah, so I have scraped
I was
as
going
much
to
as
say,
I
fun
can.
fact, you can scrape it off with a small knife or even another
Yes.
fingernail if you're careful.
Yeah, I've got most of it off. I have the occasional sparkly bit on my fingernails, which is fun.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so yeah, Bia gave her very insanely energetic talk
Yeah,
about DEF CON.
I told 2 or 3 people that normally come to the LV Hackers meetup about how it could have been recorded and played back at like half speed.
And it still would have been too fast.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't want to sound like we're giving her a hard time. She did a good job.
She did an excellent job.
She's what, 10?
I somewhere around there.
I think she's 10.
I was tired when she was done.
Yeah, she was quite energetic. I told her dad he didn't have to give her coffee before the meetup, and he said that he hadn't, which is what I expected, and that she'd been up since 6 a.m.
Which I expected.
Yeah, and somehow she still had that much energy, and she was energetic for the whole night. And I don't know.
Yeah, she's that's an amazing little girl. She everything from picking locks, hardware hacking. She went into the voting hack the voting machines thing and learned a bunch of stuff there.
Awesome.
There was a post on Twitter recently. She got bored, so she sat down and started writing programs on her TI. So
no, she also interviewed some people about the what's it called, the Roots.
Roots, yeah.
Thing at DEF CON. I'll have to find it and add it to the show notes. It was actually fun to watch because she interviewed one of the women who were involved in starting it. I think I retweeted it on Twitter. I'll have to look for it later. Messing up the show here, but yeah, it was definitely on Twitter. I retweeted it under my own account, Gangriff. So yeah, it'll be there somewhere. But yeah, it was kind of cool. She interviewed a few people, including another kid. I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yep.
So
she won Danny's Who Slide It Is Anyway.
Oh right. I still have nightmares. You can't unsee those slide decks.
No, you can't.
Luckily, she was not involved in any of the nasty slide decks.
I guess
10. I mean, that would be like corruption of a minor. They were terrible.
Danny said he was terrified. He had to clean everything up before.
Oh, terrible.
She was going to be there. Yeah, that was something else.
Yeah, I'll say something else, something I may not have needed to see in my life.
Right. So,
all right.
Let's see. In other announcements, B-Sides Delaware. As soon as I know dates, I will pass them out. It looks like we're going to be ramping up our meetings to plan all the things.
Awesome.
So that'll be starting soon.
I keep forgetting you're on the board for that. Is Rich still involved?
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
He buys all the things.
He buys all the things.
Yes. He's the swag coordinator.
Oh, well, you need a swag coordinator.
Yeah, he likes to beat up vendors and find the best deals. So, hey,
that sounds like something he'd be good at. Maybe someday we'll have to have him on the podcast. I don't know what we would talk about with him, since he's like not even.
He's going to want to talk like desktop or something. Ugh.
That's valid. Some sysadmins have to deal with desktops. Just because I don't doesn't mean, and you do, don't you?
I do. I just don't like
Maybe you
doing
could learn
it.
something. Maybe you could learn something from Rich.
I don't want to learn something.
Now that's a bad attitude to have.
About desktop? Yeah, maybe. No, we want to go the more Google route, and do the not worry so much about the system that is connecting to us, but authenticate it on the fly.
Yeah.
So if I don't have to manage your desktop, my life is much better.
What are they calling it?
Yours.
They're saying that authentication is the new edge.
Yes.
I think is what the term people are, or the phrase people are using to describe this whole movement, that your network no longer has an edge because everything's in the cloud, and authentication is now the edge.
Yeah, the edgeless network. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like wireless has no wires.
Yeah, right. And it's not it's not a terrible model if you could manage to secure your stuff that way, right?
Well, I'm going to give it a shot.
Well, I hope that works out. Yeah.
Me too.
I actually I've been meaning to look this up and I haven't had a chance yet, but I was talking to a coworker who had attended a talk at some desktop management conference. And the talk was from an admin at Facebook, and about how they manage desktops. And what they do is they actually deploy and manage their desktops using Puppet. And whenever somebody wants a change to their desktop, they submit a pull request to a Git repo, which has all their Puppet manifests. And then, like, if the admins say, yup, you can have that, all they do is approve the pull request and merge it. I'm like, that is an awesome approach. Awesome approach right there.
That is a great approach. And it would never work at any place I have ever worked.
No, if you're managing a staff that is mostly developers, it would work perfect. The problem is, you and I have never worked at a place that is managing a staff of mostly developers.
Right. Like I said, it'll never work anywhere that I've ever worked.
No, but I thought it was an awesome idea. I mean,
yeah,
if you're in a scenario where that would work, that's an awesome idea.
If you think about it, it's not much different than the desktop management tools. I mean,
yeah, but it's done in such a
I get that
it is done in the Iron Sysadmin way. I'll put it that way. You want to change your workstation? Figure out how to use Git. Noob.
I'm curious if does that mean that they have a config per user, or does your config change push to everybody?
I mean, the best way I can figure is that they have some, like, maybe each user is a branch or something. I don't know. That seems like it'd be impossible to manage. Listen, I didn't say I had the details. I said that this is what he told me.
Yeah, but if it is a config for each person, then that guy who insists on doing stupid things to break himself, eventually you can just say, "Yeah, sure, here, go ahead."
Yeah, you did this to yourself. Sorry, dude.
Roll back.
And you probably could. I mean, that's the cool thing about Puppet.
Sure. So what are you working on these days?
What have I been working on? In some show notes here. Oh, should we start pushing the fact that we're going to be at DerbyCon?
I'm going to be at DerbyCon.
I think we've sort of already mentioned that because of the Derby, and our talk about the project for this year, which we still haven't finished, and we really need to get on. We got to get that out. We wanted the beginning of August. Now we definitely got to get it done before the beginning of September. People need time.
Trying.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could always fall back to the old method, but I mean, I really want to make this work. Anyway. So yeah, we're both going to be at DerbyCon. Iron Sysadmin is going to make a pilgrimage to DerbyCon. So, I don't know. Should we try to
We're going to make a pilgrimage to DerbyCon, and Iron Sysadmin just happens to be part of that these days.
Yeah. I mean, we always make a pilgrimage to DerbyCon. Metal to DerbyCon. I'm going to work on that playlist. You keep talking about like I might fly out. The hell's that?
I don't know what the plans are for getting out there now. So I was actually looking at flights, and they're not insanely expensive. So I don't know. Trader. I don't know. Nobody has asked me about driving in yet, so I don't even know who's going. How many people are going on your side?
Well, so far it's just me from the college.
Oh, well.
unless Tim happens to find himself a ticket.
That might be arrangeable.
I'm sure it is. However, as much as I know Tim enjoyed DerbyCon, if he's not going to put the effort in, I'm not going to do it for him.
Well, I mean, first of all, there's tickets that are on sale now. But I was also asked about being a speaker wrangler at DerbyCon. So,
oh, that's right.
Yes,
that's right.
Which means I get a free ticket and a cool badge.
But you'll also be busy for the whole con.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, it's fun to
mind working cons. It's actually kind of fun.
But do you get to drink while you're wrangling speakers? I would hope so.
Well, when the parties and stuff happen, there's nobody speaking, so
there's no speakers to wrangle, right?
Right. So I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
As long as I'm functional the next day.
As long as you're not drinking during the day, which I don't know about you, but I generally avoid it anyway. Even when I'm just
no, I can drink. I can drink during the day as long as I'm functional.
As long as you're functional.
As long as I am a functional drunk, I'm good.
As long as you can wrangle speakers. And we're not talking
about. As long as I can spangle reekers, I'm good.
We're not talking about large magnets with electric coils in them. We're talking about the people presenting. You're wrangling presenters, correct? Not speakers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have to carry things. Well, unless of course the presenter is. I guess that could happen.
Some of the presenters could have been drinking too early, and you may.
Yeah, it's possible.
If you have to carry Chris Nickerson to a talk,
do I just tie them to the?
I want pictures.
Do I just tie them to the podium then?
I think you just kind of lay them out on the
pictures.
The
if I have to carry Chris Nickerson to a talk, that shit's going live. I'm gonna put Periscope
up. Sorry.
So for listeners, go ahead and do a Google search on Chris Nickerson.
Yeah, if you don't know who Chris Nickerson is,
honestly, watch some of his talks. They're amazing.
He does have some very awesome talks. No matter how inebriated he is, he has some very good talks. In fact, they get even more amusing when he's inebriated.
Yeah, they do.
So anyway, I had a hypervisor die, not at work, but at home, which was fun.
Yes.
Had to do some quick thinking there.
Yes, you did.
Get things up and running again. Yeah, so I had a UPS here that had bad batteries in it, and for whatever reason, the things that were connected to the UPS several times over the course of about a week or two until I got new batteries to put in it were spontaneously shutting down and coming back up. Except for, basically, it seemed that their power was being cut or it was dipping too low or something. So everything that was configured to turn back on after a power failure would come back up, but everything else that wasn't would, of course, stay off. So I had a machine, well, several machines, honestly, that this had happened to over the course of, 2 weeks. It might have happened 3-4 times. I mean, your machines were one of them, so you may have a good recollection as well. I think it was 4 times. And this machine that failed on me came up every time, no problem. I mean, it would go down hard, and it would stay down because it wasn't configured to power back on after a power failure. And then I would just have my wife go power it back on if I wasn't home, or I would go power it on when I got home, and it would come right up. So I got batteries, and I had to, the batteries that were in the thing had swollen, which was a real pain in the butt. I couldn't just pull them out and replace them. I had to disconnect everything from the UPS and pull it out of the shelf I have it on and disassemble the dang thing and pull the batteries out. Got the new batteries in, got them all wired up because this isn't, it's a smart UPS 1400, but it's not one that has the batteries in like a pack or like in a tray, like you might be expecting if you are familiar with the smart UPS 1400 or 1500, which have the same form factor. These are like, there's four, they're the same sort of batteries you use to control like electric scooters, according to the place I bought them from anyway. There's four of them, and the ones that come from APC are like glued together. And then there's cables on top of them you have to connect, right? So I went to do that, and I couldn't pull the things out because they were swollen. They wouldn't fit through the opening in the front of the UPS anymore, which was fun. So
those UPSs I have experience with, and we've had pretty much all of them have swollen batteries over the years.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened here. So I basically had to pull the top off of it, pull out the rails that the batteries were supposed to slide into. Then I could pull the battery out through the top because they would not fit through the opening in the front anymore. They had the tolerances are that small that, I mean, the batteries weren't hyper swollen. They were definitely swollen and like bulbous looking, but they weren't like enormous.
Right.
But anyway, I got all that done, get the battery back in, get the thing reassembled, put it back in the shelf, plugged it back in, plugged all the servers back into it. Everything looks cool. The battery's starting to charge. No more alert from the battery. I start turning servers back on, and my hypervisor won't turn on. Just nothing. You hit the power button, nothing. No beep, no fan spin. The little indicator light on the motherboard that says I've got power, that's on, but it won't turn on.
That's because you shut it down properly.
That must be. I shut it down properly.
If you would have just crashed it,
unplugged it,
yep,
it would have gone down
fine.
hard and come right back up without a problem. So yeah, I ended up. That machine had 2 discs in an MD Atom RAID 1 set. I had another hypervisor, which was a Dell that I had inherited, which also used SATA disks that has 4 drive bays, but I only have 3 drives in it in a RAID 5 set, right? So I basically took one of the 2 MD Atom drives, one of the 2 drives from the array in the failed computer or failed server, and put it into the open slot in the Dell, and up it came. There were I have all my VMs in logical volumes. So I just basically started up the volume group that they live in, and I was able to pull off the VM configs from the old drive and define them on the new box and started them up. Thank you, simplicity. Thank you, libvirt.
So for all of our listeners who are saying, wow, these guys who talk about sysadminning screwed up and lost their UPS and crashed their systems and blah, 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 blah. To be clear, we were getting alerted about the UPS. We knew about it. We knew the batteries were low and they had to be replaced. We're just lazy, and it costs money to do that.
That's what it comes down to.
I mean, seriously though, we knew about it, and as it turns out, when the batteries start alerting like that on the 1400s, it's usually too late. It's usually if you don't have a set on standby, it starts power dips every time it does a self-test. It'll knock the systems offline. It's kind of a pain. So it sort of expected it. We've had it in the past, and we just kind of move ahead with it and get the batteries and off we go.
Yeah, so I mean, in this case, I had ordered batteries about 3-4 days. Well, might have been a week after we figured out that there was an issue. Mainly, like these are home machines, right? I mean, yeah, some of them are important-ish, but this isn't like our bread and butter, right? So Anyway, it took me a
Please
little
don't
bit of
butter
time.
my server.
I'm gonna put butter on your server when I go
Please
downstairs.
don't butter my server. It just doesn't work well when you put butter on it. Don't ask me how I know.
All right, so I don't know if it's your mic or if it's me, but you've gotten really distorted all of a sudden.
Distorted?
Yeah.
Oh no. I can hear you fine. Hang on, let me bang things. Wait, you can't hear the banging. Is that better?
Yeah, no, you're still distorted.
I'm still distorted. Technology is hard, man. I can't hear the distortion, so I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Hang on, let me. I can turn it off and on again.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's do this. If I switch microphones, I'm gonna sound like crap now, but does that make any difference? Yeah, I know I sound different.
Yeah, the distortion is gone now.
The distortion is gone now. Isn't this exciting podcasting as we're
Live.
Live
What happens when you record a show live?
debugging our setup
I mean,
here?
it literally it just like picked up when we started talking about the UPS about maybe 2 minutes before I told you that it was getting distorted.
It's because we were talking about disparaging technology.
That's what it is.
All right, how's that? Any better?
Hey, it's back to normal now. Awesome.
Yeah, I turned it off and on again.
Cool. All right, so let's be silent for like 30 seconds or 10 seconds or so I can easily cut this together later. All right, that should do it.
Yeah, the other option is to yell really, really loud, and then you just look for the big spike instead of the little spike.
Yeah, well, I wrote down the time when I told you about the mic, so I should be able to find it easy enough.
I see. Splicing audio together. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's fun stuff, man. Yeah, I don't know what happened. You were talking and just all of a sudden it started to go weird. I don't know.
It's the alcohol.
Did you spill some on the mic?
The microphone is drunk.
Yeah. All right. So let's forge ahead.
All right.
All right. So yeah, server recovery in my free time. Iron Sysadmin. It is the way. It is the life. So that's pretty much the biggest project I've had going on since we last recorded. Getting that UPS back up and into normal operation, and then fixing the server that died. It's just my luck. It is my luck.
Oh, you're familiar with Murphy too?
Your mic's doing it again.
I didn't do anything.
I don't know. It just started doing it.
All right. It's time to start shutting things down. Stupid microphone. Go away. See, you spend money on these fancy microphones.
Yep.
Go away. Go away. Go away. Better yet? Still here? You still hearing me?
Yeah, I still hear you. You're still distorted.
Damn it. I'm running out of things to turn off.
If you want to like exit the feed and reboot and come back, the link I gave you earlier should still work just fine.
Yeah, rebooting, I'm not sure what to do it. I'm curious if so. That's the other mic.
Yeah, that's working just fine.
And if I switch back, it's good again?
Yeah, now it's good again.
All right, I'm not touching nothing.
He's gonna sit still the rest of the podcast.
I'm gonna sit still. I ain't gonna do nothing.
All right.
Iron Sysadmin Ninja.
All right, let's try to get through the rest of the show before your mic goes weird again.
I haven't touched anything.
All right, cool. All right. So yeah, I guess we will move along to the main topic because that's, a thing we do around here.
Main topic.
So we've been talking a whole lot about this Docker thing, right?
What's Docker?
What's Docker? Yeah, it's funny. You remember Tony who visited our chat last time we recorded, right?
The Jeep guy.
Yeah, he wrote
Right.
me on Facebook today. He works in IT, so he actually has a reason to be viewing our podcast. He's not contrary to the comments that he's leaving. He's not just trolling us. I mean, maybe he is. I don't know, but
I'm
he
pretty sure
said
he's just trolling us.
he told me today he's been in IT since the '80s,
I'm so
and
sorry.
I know, right? What a golden age, right? And during our tech talk last week, our main topic, he said he couldn't figure out what the heck we were talking about. I guess containers and whatnot just aren't his thing. He's not. I don't know what level of IT he's at or what it is that he does normally, but I just don't know that many details about him. But yeah, he said he was having trouble figuring out what the heck we were talking about. And it really sort of made me realize that some of our topics get really sort of high level architectural level that
Yep.
your average admin maybe might have trouble following. So I thought it couldn't hurt. Why don't we just chat tonight about what it is that we're using Docker for? Because I've heard a lot of other people talk about Docker, and it's always these like pie in the sky conceptual things about, oh, you can do continuous integration and continuous delivery, and you can do all the clouds and all the fancy crap and scrums and DevOps and whatever. And no one really gets into the grid as to what exactly it is that they're doing with Docker. So
Okay.
I know both of us are using Docker in some capacity. So let's just give the folks some examples of what it is that we're doing. And if it's a short topic, it's a short topic. If it's not, whatever, we can go into some details and how these things operate and whatnot. So for me, the biggest use at the moment of Docker is with the Derby project. Unfortunately, at work, we don't have a lot of uses for Docker yet. And I haven't had a whole lot of time to deploy it in my own personal projects, which is where I normally deploy new technologies that I'm trying to learn. That's coming though. I've been working on my migration to get my stuff off of Rails 6. And once that's done, I'm going to start really looking at Docker pretty heavily for my various personal websites and applications and things. And there's a number of services that I run here, for my own stuff, which is basically a very small scale business if you want to look at it from a technology level. That just supports what I do here at home and my personal lab and my personal websites and whatever. But anyway, with the Derby, I had a problem to solve, which was how do I isolate services on something as tiny as a Raspberry Pi? Normally, in the age where I first designed the Derby, I would have immediately just said, "Oh, well, I'll run VMs." Well, you don't have the resources at your disposal on a Raspberry Pi to be able to do that sort of thing uh, for more than maybe one service. In fact, I don't know that the ARM CPU, especially at the time, I think the first Derby I made was 2015. I don't think that you could virtualize on an ARM CPU at the time. So I started pondering on how the heck I was going to do this thing. I thought, oh well, some crazy IP tables rules might do it, or this or that. And then I finally decided, let's just try Docker. And I was able to find a source build of Docker that was designed to run on the ARM CPU. And I set that up, and sure enough, it worked. And the first version of the Derby ran Docker, and it has ever since. So that's really the biggest project I've run on top of Docker. So how about you? What sort of things do you have going on Docker?
Um. So my needs aren't exactly Raspberry Pi related.
Right. You're using Docker for the normal reasons. Not
Sure.
I have a single CPU, 512 meg of memory machine that I need to run 4 different isolated services on.
Yeah. So my introduction to Docker was a couple of years ago, and it was a guy who explained how we were going to take this big application that we were running at the startup, and we are going to break it up to little components, and we were going to put it on this system that was going to automatically push things out all over the place, and just kind of
microservices. Buzzword bingo. Drink.
It was gonna. I didn't say microservices, but I'll drink anyway.
No, but you implied it.
Well, so the idea was to run them all over the place and run them in such a manner that if something went wrong with one of them, you would just kill it and restart it. Seemed reasonable. And the technology sounded kind of cool. So started looking into it a little bit. In the meantime, I deployed it on my personal server because I kind of needed to know how this stuff worked.
Yep. So you work the same way I do.
Yes.
Break my personal stuff so that my professional stuff does not suffer.
Right. So I virtualized everything except...
You mean Dockerized? You already had it virtualized.
Yeah, it was already virtualized. So I Dockerized everything except Zimbra.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Zimbra is the only thing that's not Dockerized.
I can't even imagine Dockerizing Zimbra.
I found somebody who did, and I'm contemplating playing with it.
Don't.
Gonna do it. Gonna do it. It's gonna be fun.
It's gonna break all the best practices.
Awesome. So there's some benefits that I have found with Docker that are just simply amazing. Every single time you run a Docker container from scratch, the environment is pristine.
Yep.
No cruft left over from the last 72 updates you did.
Yep.
No, like everything is gone. So like
because
in a lot of cases,
you build a Docker image, it lays down the OS.
Yep.
It pulls the most recent version of your application. It does, whatever commands you told it to do to make all that stuff work.
Right. So okay.
100% a pristine, fresh install.
So I would compare this. I mean, the comparison's not fair, and it's definitely not apples to apples, but I spent a number of years building RPMs for Red Hat-based systems.
Yeah.
And one of the tenets of building an RPM is that you always start with pristine sources. Right? So when you build an RPM for something, you start with the original source code. You don't put patches in it and then leave that in there. You put in the original source code. And then you, as part of the build process, you add the patches. So each patch is added individually during the build of the RPM.
Right.
And part of the reason for this is that you can go back in later and remove patches that you don't need. You can update patches, etc. And you're not dealing with source code that has changed.
Right.
And in some
you're not trying to remove a patch that's been applied to your source code 10 years ago or whatever.
Yep.
You're literally starting with pristine source and applying the patches you want.
Right. And it sounds like that's a pain in the ass to start, but as you progress forward and build more and more of these, you'll realize that no, that's actually a really good benefit, because if you start only with the pristine sources, then as things are fixed, you can remove patches. You don't have to go back in and add all those damn patches that you had in there before.
Right, because occasionally you have to been applied back to the root and right.
Occasionally you have to update patches. Depends on a lot of different factors, but Docker is very much the same way. You start with a pristine image. Then you can put anything you want on the image, but you start with a base OS that's always the same. You start with whatever your source code is. You install your applications, and whenever you build that Docker image, it's exactly the same every time it comes out the other end. So when you start that Docker image, you've got a pristine environment to run in. And that has some really cool benefits. So we ran across, my CEO posted a link the other day to a company called Edge edge mesh, and they run something they call clean slate protocol. Every night at whatever time it is, I would assume midnight. Every night they destroy every single Docker image running on their servers, and they redeploy their entire infrastructure every
I
single
think
night.
I think I read this article. I think I saw you share it.
Right. So the idea being that it does a couple of things. Well, first of all, it verifies that all your automation works, and that in the case of a problem, you can redeploy your entire infrastructure with no problem. The other thing it does from a security standpoint is if somebody has actually attacked your systems and has gained a foothold somehow onto your in one of your Docker containers,
Sure.
if you blow away the Docker container and
Now it's gone.
restart,
No more
their
foothold.
foothold's gone.
Unless their foothold is in whatever data is persistent across rebuilds.
Right. Right.
But you're right.
There's exceptions. Yep.
Yeah.
And even if they were to come up with a container breach attack that allowed them to gain a foothold on the host system, depending on what you're running, if you're running one of the immutable OSs, say Core OS or Atomic, they're not going to be able to stick around, because when you blow the system away and restart, I mean, their foothold's gone.
Right.
So there's definitely some benefits there. It's interesting. So so I've been using it on my own systems for a while, kind of messing around with it, building my own images, lots of container stuff. And then I use GitLab, which is a open source re-implementation of GitHub. And to be completely honest, I think it is so superior to GitHub that I'm not sure why more people don't use it. Like, if you're hearing this and you need a solution, seriously, go look at GitHub. It's kind of awesome.
Yeah, GitLab. We're also running that at the college. I should say our web guys are running that at the college, and it's pretty nice. I like the self-service nature of it. Once you've got an account, you can make your own repos and whatnot. It's definitely a nice project.
Yeah, there's definitely room for improvement, but it's so they have so much stuff built in now. They have a CI system built in, a continuous integration system.
Yeah, this is really the only other use of Docker that I'm with, though it isn't my project. But I think you're about to cover the same thing, so go right ahead.
Yeah, so Docker's continuous integration system. There's a bunch of different ways to deploy it. I'm sorry, GitLab's continuous integration system. A bunch of different ways to deploy it. You can deploy it on a server where you actually have dedicated servers for your continuous integration stuff. Or you could deploy it in a Docker environment. And the Docker environment allows you to, when you build a project, and again, we go back to this pristine image thing. Every time you build, it starts with a clean Docker image. So say you want to build a Java app. The build will start with a whatever version you need, Java container with all your build tools in there. And it is pristine every single time you build. So you don't end up with, I built this 12 times and, it left a library behind. And, I've seen this in my own environments in years past. I've seen this in Jenkins environments. Jenkins can use Docker now as well. Excuse me. But I mean, you can build these things. It automates the entire build process. You can jump between different container types. You can spin up services as part of your build process. So part of a good build system is testing. Okay, you do your build. Now it's time to test. You built your entire container. You spin it up. Oh, okay. You need a database. So spin up a MySQL container, and you need a web server. Okay, spin up a Nginx container, and you build all the config in there that you need to run all your tests. It'll build it, configure it, deploy it on a Docker server in an isolated manner and give you access to it. And you can run all your tests on it. And when you're ready, you can push deployments out. Like the entire thing is automated from A to Z. It's kind of incredible. And we've been using that for a while now, and it has sped up. The continuous integration bit is we have a couple different mechanisms that we use. For some projects, we say whenever they tag it for release, it runs it, builds it, does tests, etc. For others, every time you push a commit, it runs it, builds it, gives you the results, etc. So it's pretty flexible. It's nice and fast. You don't have to worry about it. And once you've set up your build environment inside of the CI system, it's gonna recreate it exactly the same way every time. So if you've been down that path where you've set up a build environment and it's great, it's wonderful, and then a couple months later you're like, well, why isn't my awesome build environment working anymore? You probably have a library that ended up sticking around somewhere. You move to something like CI, especially in a Docker CI environment, and if a couple months down the road it suddenly doesn't work, you probably broke something in your code because you're getting the same environment every single time.
Right. So I'm trying to look. Did you hear? I think it was on Paul's Security Weekly. Might be last week's episode. They had a guy on, and I was just trying to find the name of the product they're selling, but they have virtualized browsers that run in Docker containers, and then some sort of a browser plugin or a client or whatever, so that you can have in your browser, if you browse to a website, it will spin up a Docker container on a server, browse to the website, and display in your browser images of what the website is supposed to be presenting to you. So the idea is that all the malicious code that could be running in your browser runs in that Docker container. And then when the Docker container, when you're done browsing that site, the container is just destroyed. It's really a similar paradigm to what you're just describing, except it's being used in a much different way. I thought it was really interesting, and I was trying to find the name of it so we could talk a little more intelligently about it. But that's just another use of Docker that I've seen that sounded pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I'd have to see it actually work to. Really...
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it could be fraught with perils, but
yep.
Let me see if I can just see on my phone what episode that was.
I mean, there's other security stuff in Docker as well. So another one that was on Paul's a couple episodes ago was a piece of software called StackRox that is uses machine learning to identify attacks against your container environment and automatically mitigate them and all sorts of stuff. And what's neat about some of these is that because of how Docker works and because of the integrations that you have, in a lot of cases, you don't have to tell these tools what your environment looks like. It just asks Docker. And assuming that it has the correct permissions, it can pull all that information out. And then it uses like network taps to identify and categorize traffic and identify what the services are and all sorts of other stuff. It's pretty slick.
Yeah, so this was on Paul's Security Weekly, episode 524. I don't know if you heard that episode yet or not, but that's where I just heard it.
I remember the premise. I don't remember what the software was. What'd you say, 524?
Yeah, that's the episode I just listened to.
I think it may be when we were doing the podcast. It's amazing.
Yep, I was listening to it and talking. I mean, that I can multitask that well.
So what? I love Paul, but I do not like his website.
Yeah, I was looking at his website to try to find it, and I had to give up. I went back to my phone to find it.
This is right. Go to show archives and you'll be able to find things. That's right. Yes, 524. Funny enough, this is the episode that I had to reach back to for something else. Was this Vapor Trail?
No, Vapor Trail was another very interesting product, but very not related to Docker.
No. Okay.
I don't want to derail us too far, but at least this is Docker related.
I have fun with derailing us.
Archives.
Hey, this is the episode that they talked about the smart gun on.
They did, and that's actually what reminded me.
I don't see it on here, so I don't know.
24. It was their first tech interview. Was it the Danny Miller thing?
Ericom?
I don't know. I was like in my basement, stripping the finish off of a dining room table while I listened to it. So.
Remote access, virtualization, and web security. Well, you know,
it sounds like it. Anyway, it was neat technology, and we are not prepared to talk about it, but it was Docker in the bag.
Clearly.
It was pretty neat stuff.
Clearly. Well, I will go ahead and add that to the list of things. Although it says Citrix on the website, so I'm sort of like not going to really, I'm kind of afraid of it already.
I could run Docker, but it's going to be really expensive.
Yeah. I don't know. Does Citrix do Docker now?
Well, I mean, I would imagine that it's running Docker in VMs on Citrix.
Citrix Zen server runs Docker.
Awesome.
Yep. So Citrix Zen server was the first hypervisor to introduce a supported Docker integration in a commercially available product.
Why do we need hypervisors that run Docker?
So that you can run Docker images next to your VMs? Duh.
I think they've missed the point. I really think they've missed the point. Anyway.
It's really funny watching technology companies tout, like, we were the first to deploy this. Like, that's great, technology company. You do realize that being first usually means that you have the worst implementation.
I mean, well, no, usually being first means that either you're an innovator or everyone else thought it was a really dumb idea.
If you're an innovator, you're quickly going to be outpaced by everybody else.
History will tell us whether Citrix was an innovator or it was a really dumb idea. So anyway,
don't die on the show. That'd be bad.
Yeah, back to Docker. I guess that was all related.
So yeah, I use it for so much. From a company standpoint, the company I work for, like, the plan is to run all of our workloads on Docker. And we're headed right down the path.
That's a good goal. I mean, so, you're familiar with the environment at the college, but we've got like 300 something VMs. This is like the definition of VM sprawl, right? So we went from a couple servers that had a bunch of shared environments to 1 billion VMs in the course of a couple of years, which is exactly what happened to everyone that had a lot of workloads to run. And now it's like, now we can do Docker. So take all those individual workloads that are just wasting cycles on your VMs and put them on a single host again, right? But now they're isolated. So I'd love to see us take the VMs are just getting worse because we've gone from, we had a single server that had a bunch of web applications on it to a bunch of virtual servers where we took all those web applications and spread them out across several servers because, that's best practices, right? You don't want all your applications running on the same box for many reasons. And then we went to, all of those servers are single points of failure. So, that machine that's running WordPress for the college's main website, uh, if it fails, the college's main website is down. So we're going to make that one server that's running WordPress into 3 servers running WordPress. And then
Yeah.
we're going to load balance them. So now we've gone from one server that's running, WordPress and the college's website, and then one, backend database server, to 2 proxy servers, 3 web servers, and like 5 servers that make up our database backend. So if you want to talk about VM sprawl, there you go. Now everyone's saying, oh, well, running single web applications on a whole VM, like that's wasting a lot of resources and it makes you less agile. So we're going to take those and put them in Docker containers.
Yep.
So I'd honestly, I'd love to see us get to a state where, those 3 servers turn into a single Docker container that is available across several machines, or maybe 2 Docker containers that can be easily spun up and spun down across a couple of Docker hosts. And then we have, instead of 300 RHEL machines, we've got, a dozen Docker hosts, and then containers that run all of our various applications. And maybe we have, 100 containers that run all the applications. So I'd
Right.
love to get to that scenario. And it sounds like you're already headed that way. But it's a lot, from my perspective, it's a lot easier for you to get there because you have a lot less workloads to run than I do.
Well, we also don't have the history of having all those
Right.
workloads.
Right. You
So,
don't have them
but
all already up
what
and running.
what you'll find is that those 300 servers that you have, assuming you've got duplicates in there, let's say 200 servers. When you move to Docker, you're going to go down to however many physical hosts you have, but you're going to end up with like 1,000 containers because you're going to
Right.
end up splitting things apart into smaller microservices. The upside of which is that if any one of those fails, you can just spin it up somewhere else. And if you need to
So
scale, you can just spin up 50 of them.
the piece that either I don't understand or I think you might be wrong on is, if we're running WordPress, as in my previous example,
Yep.
as the platform that runs our website, we can't exactly split WordPress into a smaller instance than it already is.
Right.
It's a
WordPress
PHP
is a
web
web
app.
app. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So
So
if you could,
we may keep the database infrastructure the way it is and move WordPress into a container. And then we can run 24 WordPresses on a single box or more. I don't know. It depends on how it all pans out, or less.
sure.
I don't know. It depends on how the Docker hosts are
Well,
set
let
up.
me explain it this way. When it comes to Docker, the objective is to ensure that you have roughly even workload across all of your servers,
Yeah.
and you don't care how many that is per server.
Yeah.
If that's 10, great. If that's 50, okay, fine, whatever.
Sure.
And you know what? If 10 of them die and they move somewhere else, who cares? You don't. You're letting the underlying Docker system orchestrate that for you. All you care about is, are my services up?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't treat your containers
But
like you
yeah,
did servers. Like
right.
today, if I even in my example of, I've got 3 web servers running Docker or running WordPress with 5 servers in the back end running MariaDB and MaxScale and whatnot, I'd still treat those servers like, if one of them is destroyed for some reason, it's not, it doesn't have me out of service, but it's still a priority to get it replaced. In the Docker world, it's more like I have a defined image for a container. And if one of my containers is somehow destroyed, I just spin up another one based on how it was defined. Or
Right.
I don't even spin it up, right? It could be my orchestration layer spins it up.
Right. So you go into the WordPress example. Even if your database is containers that are floating around all over the place, you're right. Your WordPress is probably going to end up being a single container. No need to have more, which makes sense. Stuff that's going to end up splitting is something like Zimbra. I know you're not looking forward to that. But Zimbra
Yeah,
runs a lot of different services.
it
So
does. It does.
so the Docker way, which is um a good way to head and not always practical, um, would be to run a single service in each container. So taking Zimbra, for example, you would run postfix in one container. You would run the spell checker in one container. You would run the web interface in one container, and they would all talk to each other. That way, if any one service had a problem, you could kill it and restart it. Or if any of those services was overloaded, you could just horizontally scale it by spinning up more of them. That doesn't work for every app. Apps have to be built to be able to do that. Zimbra is certainly not built to with Docker in mind at this point. But
So for those of you unfamiliar, Zimbra packages a bunch of open source projects to sort of comprise Zimbra. The only piece that's sort of proprietary, and I wouldn't even call it proprietary, is the what they call the store server, which is a big Jetty web app. Right. So you basically have prepackaged postfix and LDAP and what else is in there? There's a whole bunch of services that are running Memcached, Nginx,
yep,
if you're running the
lots
proxy.
and lots of stuff.
Yeah. So what Jason's describing is you take all those various pieces, including all the smallest pieces, like the spell checker is its own service. It runs on one of the store servers, right? So when you're in webmail and you run the spell checker, it's actually contacting a service which runs on the store server. So what Jason's saying is that would no longer run on the store server. It'd be another container, and it would be accessible to all of your web application or webmail containers, which would basically be Jetty with this web app running. The thing that's a little tricky there, though, is for Zimbra anyway, the mail store, which is this Jetty application, runs a number of various public services. There's webmail, which runs on the web ports. There's IMAP is actually implemented inside of the store, which is this web app, which is then proxied out through Nginx. But I mean, IMAP, that's a service right in there.
Yep.
But like spell checker, I think might even be a part of that. I don't know if that would even be split out. Maybe it's its own. I think it runs A-Spell, which I think is its own service.
Right.
But anyway, my point is that it may not be a great candidate for the Docker ecosystem, at least for now. I mean, I guess you can run several services in a Docker container as long as they all run in the same process. That's the key.
Sure. I mean, so the GitLab container runs. I mean, GitLab is a bunch of different pieces that run, lots of different services that run, and that's a single container. So that doesn't quote follow the Docker way.
Yeah.
But there's others that do. So there's another product called Black Duck that is a Java-based service. Basically, it scans source code and evaluates your imports to identify if there's security problems. There's some other stuff. Their recent release actually splits Black Duck into a bunch of smaller containers that run individual services. So, it's an example of a company that's sort of trying to do it the Docker way and creating a bunch of different containers for their service.
Okay.
Makes it a little harder to deploy, but
so we're running up on probably a little over an hour and a half. If we want to try to hit a couple high points on if you got any more really cool things you're doing in Docker containers, and then we probably want to wrap it up. So
I'm running all the things in Docker as best I can.
Yeah, it looks like you got Splunk on your list here. So you've got the Splunk application running in Docker. Does that fit the normal paradigms here?
Best I can tell, Splunk themselves built this Docker container.
That's pretty awesome.
I came across it, I built it, and it worked. I don't know that I would recommend it for large deployments. Splunk is sort of the type of service that you dedicate entire systems to.
Yeah, but for a small
But
deployment, it seems to
for a
work
small
perfectly.
deployment, it works. It's pretty cool. It works well. There's a bug in it that, and maybe this is how I have it deployed, but there's a bug that every time you restart it, every time you delete the container and restart it, you end up having to go through and accept the EULAs and
Freaking
everything
Splunk
else.
EULA.
But once it's up and running, it works great.
The number of times that the Splunk forwarder has died on me because of an upgraded RPM and the EULA got reset.
Yep.
So freaking annoying.
Yeah. Well, they're just protecting themselves.
Yeah, no,
So.
I get it. I get it. All right. So you got anything else cool? It looks like you've got a list here. You got Splunk stood out for me. Personal production and development workloads. We kind of covered those. Redmine. That sounds like a perfect candidate for a container, just because it could be packaged and easier to install. Redmine's a bear.
Yeah. There's so a lot of this stuff comes from Docker Hub.
Yeah.
So if you just go to Docker Hub and type in your favorite piece of software, there may be a container for it.
Yeah. There could be.
If I remember correctly, that's where I got the Redmine one.
I actually forgot about this when I was making my list of Docker containers. I run Plex in a Docker container as well.
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's a good one.
So, and actually, I had to update it not too long ago, and it was everything they said it would be.
Yeah, I mean, upgrading GitLab on a server can be a bear. Like, you can upgrade it, and there's some stupid file that's wrong or whatever. Something doesn't go right.
Updating Plex was I pulled a new version of the container.
Yep.
I stopped my existing container. I started a new one with I think I gave it a new tag or a new name. I forget exactly how I did it. And then once I was sure it was working, I deleted the old one. Off it went. Everything was fine.
Yep.
I had all my data I had all my data external to the container, all the config external to the container. I literally had just the application in the container. It worked exactly like they've told me Docker containers are supposed to work, which was pretty darn sweet. I was happy for that because
I've done that with
Plex isn't exactly a difficult thing to update, but it was nice to just say like, okay, I've got like 4 steps. If I can repeat these 4 steps whenever I need an update, then I'm golden. It takes me 15 minutes to update my Plex or less, right? Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I've done it with GitLab and Nextcloud a number of times. You just pull a new container and run it, and it runs its own update scripts, and off it goes.
Yeah, I forgot about Nextcloud. I'm looking at Calabora Office, which from what I'm reading is like a LibreOffice online deployment for Nextcloud, which will sort of turn your Nextcloud into something sort of like Google Apps or Google Docs.
Right.
I haven't seen it in use yet, but supposedly the way that works is you run your Nextcloud instance however you want to run it, whether it's in a Docker container or not. Mine isn't, yours is. And then Calabora Office runs in a Docker container. You just spin up the container, you point Nextcloud at it and say, yep, I've got Calabora online running in this thing. And then it just sort of interacts and works. So I guess we'll see how that works out once I finally get it. I was trying to get it up and running before the show tonight because we keep our show notes in Nextcloud so that both Jason and I can see it pretty easily. And I was hoping to get us some collaborative editing, but didn't get it done before the show started.
Otherwise, we're fighting to make it, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, the number of times one of us has overwritten the other one's changes in the show notes has been appalling for a couple of sysadmins. All right. So anyway, you got any more you really want to chat about, or
no,
you got it pretty
I'm
well
good.
covered?
I'm good to go.
Confluence, Splunk, Redmine, GitLab, this Black Duck thing, Artifactory.
Artifactory.
Curious what that is.
Yeah, Artifactory. So whenever you build software, that thing that's left over, that executable or that library is an artifact. Artifactory just collects those.
For historical purposes?
No, it's for deployment. So you put all your artifacts in one place, and then whenever you deploy something, you can just pull it right out of Artifactory.
I get it. Get the same one. Cool. All right. Well, I think that covers things we're doing with Docker. I hope that helps give people an idea of what it is you might do with Docker, why you might run Docker, from a less abstract way and a more real world. These are things that we're actually doing with Docker. Um, I'm hoping the number of things that I'm doing with Docker can expand a bit, because I really want to get into this technology and get deeper into, a number of the platform as a service, or just at least orchestration tools that go along with Docker. Just because I really want to start seeing them in use at work. And I think the best way to do that is to get familiar with them outside of work, which is part of why we started this whole journey down the Docker path. I find that a great way to learn is to force myself to talk about it.
Well, I mean, that's what Danny wants us to do with the LV Hackers. Choose a topic you know nothing about and give a talk on it next month.
Yeah, so interesting. I don't know if I want to announce this just yet, but Danny and I have had a couple discussions about an interesting series of talks we're going to start giving once we both have the time to do it, and we're thinking that'll be after DerbyCon. But I am going to build something, and then Danny's going to break it. I'm going to write a talk about how I built it and how I secured it, and then he's going to write sort of a counter talk on how he broke it.
Cool. And then we need a counter talk on how we fixed it.
Yeah, right. So, like, as an example, I think the first time around, I'm going to do something like build a web server running some common web application like Drupal or WordPress or something, and secure it the best way I know how, and then just turn it over to him and let him try to break it. And then, just hands off. Don't touch it. See how he breaks it. And then he's going to write his talk. I'm going to write my talk. We're going to give them on the same night. And then we'll see how things go, and then move on to the next thing. Try to build some other thing. And then he tries to break it. Right. So it should be interesting. I don't know when we're going to get the first one together. Like I said, it could be as early as like November. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be fun.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah. So, all right. I think we're going to call it a night. If you want to find us on the web, as you would expect, it is ironsysadmin.com, which will still redirect you to the list on my own personal website where the shows are listed. If you would like to donate money to us to help us produce the show, which, again, thank you to the folks who do this. Again, it's not a ton of money, but it is definitely helpful. Patreon.com/ironsysadmin. You can donate as little or as much as you'd like, and we will appreciate all of it. If you want to find us on Facebook, facebook.com/ironsysadmin. Also Twitter, twitter.com/ironsysadmin. If you want to watch the show, you may be listening to us audio only, which is really the audience that we build the show for. But you can watch us record every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find us at ironsysadmin.com/YouTube, which will redirect you to our YouTube page because we're not popular enough on YouTube to have our own custom URL yet. Of course, you can find podcasts like you would expect on Apple Podcasts or Apple iTunes, depending on what lingo you like to use, and Stitcher Radio, because Stitcher Radio is all about podcasts, right? And I just want to mention again, what's that? So I hear. Just want to mention again that the two of us will be at DerbyCon, depending. It doesn't matter how we get there. We're going to be there. We already have tickets. We already have rooms, places to stay. We'll be there.
I apologize for the amount of chickens we had to sacrifice to get those tickets.
Man, this year's DerbyCon, I have depended completely on others. I was not around the day that tickets went on sale, and even if I was, I would have missed them anyway, I think.
Yeah, it was a
bad year for tickets. But anyway, this is the last year at the Hyatt, and we wanted to be there. I mean, Jason, I think you've been to every DerbyCon, right?
Every single one.
I've only missed one because my dad decided to get married that weekend. And I don't know, really inconsiderate.
The nerve of some people.
The nerve. So anyway, I'm going to kick around the idea of maybe recording something live at DerbyCon. I don't know if we're going to be able to pull that off or not, but we'll work that out.
We can record something. I'm not so sure about live, but we can try.
Hopefully there'll be some awesome podcast party we get invited to.
Well, they do have that, so
They do. They do. Maybe we'll be.
we're
Maybe
sort
you'll.
of the odd guys out having a Sysadmin podcast, not a security podcast. But you know
Yeah.
what? I
Right.
happen to know some people.
I
You
think
know
it'd
them too.
be. I think it would be pretty awesome if we could get ourselves in on one of those group podcasts that seem to come
Yeah.
out of DerbyCon every year.
So Jerry, if
we'll-
you're listening,
Yeah, right. Get us in with the right crowd, Jerry. Come on. Anyway, yep. If you go to DerbyCon and you want to meet us, look us up on Twitter. Like I said, twitter.com/IronSysadmin, or look me up at Gangriff or Jason.
you can look me up at Xenophage. There's an A in there.
There's no Z either.
Nope, no Z. That's 2 hints. You can't give 2.
We're back to this. If you pay us, what the hell is it? $20 a month on Patreon. I'll tell you how to spell Jason's Twitter handle.
Or you could just follow Danny and he'll just tweet it out to everybody.
Yeah, right, exactly. Speaking of Danny, the LV InfoSec meetup group is slowly but surely growing. Got a couple of us that are frequents that are there every week or every month, I should say, and then we have got a couple people that sort of rotate in and out every month. But yeah, it's gaining a little bit of steam, I think.
So generally speaking, that is the first Wednesday of every month, unless
Except-
of course Danny went to DEF CON, in which case he has to skip a week because something about his wife not seeing him for a week and taking care of kids and
I'm just gonna wager that the first week in October the same thing's gonna happen because of DerbyCon.
Maybe.
So October's maybe the second week, but September. No, not September. Yeah, September's.
Yeah, so it's the first
which
weekend
would be the next one. The first one in September should be the first week in September. I would think that October is going to be the second week in October.
Yep. Well, we'll
just
see.
speculating. So yeah. Anyway, you can look that up on Meetups. Maybe I'll find the link and throw that in the show notes as well. So yeah, I think we're gonna call it a night. You got any final words?
Guys, check your UPSs. Sometimes the batteries die.
Yeah, and they might swell, and what a pain in the ass. All right, we've got nobody on YouTube, so I think we can end the live feed.
Live feed ending in now.